who I am. Well, if somebody would.
Hi there, I'm T.A.R.A. Shannon, and welcome to another T.A.R.A. session. Today, my guest is a very dear friend of mine and music industry veteran, Mr. Dale Peters.
Hi.
Of Dale Speaking.
Thank you.
Yes, it's so good to have you here.
So good to be here. Thank you.
So we're talking in this series all about sort of deconstruction. So taking apart the things that we were raised with and the conditioning that maybe we had growing up, and then as we grow into who we are and stepping into our authentic self and really discovering who we are authentically, what are the pieces we keep with us and what are the stuff we sort of, what is the stuff we kind of let go of? So Dale has been so gracious and saying yes to come and share some of his story about how he has discovered who he is and stepping into his authentic self. So I'm so excited you're here. And you're in the hot seat.
In the
and
hot
I'm like,
seat.
yes.
Yes.
So I know a little bit about your history and stuff, but tell me a little bit about how you were raised. Like, what was sort of the value system you were raised with in your family when you were little?
Yeah, so I was born in Saskatoon, 1959, born in Saskatoon. Lived in Saskatoon. My parents rented a house, and my dad at that time worked for Remington Rand, a typewriter company. And so we lived there for 3 years, and he did his full-time job, that sort of thing. And then Remington Rand decided to expand, and they moved us to Calgary, and then fired him 2 weeks later. Oh. Remington Rand was a typewriter company that became Compact.
Okay.
So anyway, he was a middleman being let go. So he became an entrepreneur and ran a gas station and that sort of thing, and was really did very well at that. And at the same time too, he was also selling homes, right? Wow. Show homes, right? In the days when you could have fully furnished show homes and leave the doors open.
Wow.
And I was born in, so we're talking 60s.
Right.
And then by the time we were getting a little further down the line in the 60s, you couldn't have open homes anymore because that furniture seemed to be leaving. And I remember that specifically because my dad never could figure out why would people steal stuff? Could never figure that out. Yeah. So I was raised in both my parents being German, my mother being Russian-German, Russian Low German, which is a different dialect than High German. Okay. So my mother's parents came from Russia, came out of there because of the Bolsheviks, stayed in Germany, and then once World War II really started rolling, but before it did, then they came over on the boat to Halifax. Okay. My dad's parents did the similar thing, but wound up coming through Staten Island, and then settled in Montana.
Oh, cool.
So my parents met via Bible camp.
Really?
In the Bible camp days.
Okay.
So hardcore Christian Mennonite Bible camp.
Okay.
And so my recollection of that is we'd visit my grandparents, and the men would be on one side, the women would be on the other.
Wow.
Now, of course, there's a divide between the church right in the middle. Right. So if you're a married couple, you could sit with your wife, but you'd have to sit where the divide was.
So across the aisle? So the woman, your wife, would sit on one side and you would sit on the other?
Actually, if there was a string of pews this long and then two sides, you'd sit in the middle.
Oh, okay.
So there would be the divide.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
And that was the way. And I would ask my grandfather, I said, so why can't we be sitting with my sister or grandma or mom? Well, that's not good.
That was the answer.
What? Not good means what?
What does that mean?
Zero. It means we're not telling you anything, pal. It means that. Right. So to me, as there was religion always around me, church always around me. There was always Bible school, or they sent us to Bible camp for a while. And then I was never really a fan of that. I was a fan of the camps because they were adventuresome. You go horseback riding in the mountains for 4 days. That was an adventure,
right, exactly.
But you're not cramming the Bible books, and that sort of thing. And I wasn't big on that anyway. Mm-hmm. And my parents didn't really drill down religion, but it was always around me. And because I'm very much like my father and my mother, but my father in the way of he was very touchy and took things very personable. He was very flamboyant,
Right.
bright colors, that sort of thing. And that was very kind of like, you're a man, you can't do that.
Right.
You can't do those sort of things. And all around the guise of not religion, but it was around religion at the same time. So they said, this isn't about a religion. This is just about, this is how we do things.
Right.
This is how things are done in the world.
So was your father shamed for that? Was he actually socially kind of...
He was known as, my dad's name was Alan. It's Alan. It's the
Okay.
same thing that happened to me when I was a kid. Oh, it's Dale. I was the first young man to have an earring to visit my parents in a small town, and they made a big deal about it. Like, oh, that's Esther and Alan's son. He's got an earring. And they're like, oh my God, is it in the left or right ear? Well, what does that mean? And my mom didn't know dick about any of this stuff. But she goes, well, I was told if it's in the left ear, you're gay. If it's in the right ear, you're not.
Okay.
And of course, I had it in the left ear.
Right.
Because it didn't make a difference to me. I just wanted an earring.
You were playing by that rule.
I wasn't playing by that rule, and I
right.
didn't even know there was a rule. So then, and I go, Mom, where do you get this information? She goes, well, someone told me, so it's got to be true.
Oh gosh.
And my poor mom, because she was the person who tried to sneak out of Bible camp to go get pizza that night. So she was a badass herself in her own way.
Okay,
but she would never let that out because God forbid.
Right.
God forbid that.
So you really saw yourself in your dad, like you really felt like
more
you
than
were
my mom,
more like your dad.
Yeah.
So so Bible camp, the whole thing. So it's all around you, but your parents are not really shoving it down your throat per se in your home, but it was all around you.
Always.
And so when did you start? I mean, it sounds like you were pretty young when you started to go, this doesn't really line up, or some of this stuff isn't really making sense, or wasn't resonating with you. So was the earring sort of the first act of rebellion, or the act of you kind of stating your individuality or wanting to separate from that?
That's a good question. I think it is.
Okay.
I think it is because I know that I was dealing with some sexuality as a man earlier, and then my mom had said to my sister, well, if you need any information on sex, we'll get you a book.
Okay.
And this was during the time where they were showing those awful films in school about, I'm sorry, Google it. But
like the sex education
the sex
courses
education,
that were in
absolutely
school,
horrifying. And I was horrified.
Yeah.
Horrified. All of a sudden, it made things really ugly for me. And I really believe that the human body in a person, it doesn't matter. It's beautiful.
Right. Yeah.
And see, my parents were never down on any of that. They just didn't know how to bring that around the corner. They were embarrassed because they couldn't ask questions as kids.
Yeah.
So therefore they weren't bringing that forward. My dad really, once I started dating, we had chats and pulled me aside and this is how you get a girl pregnant and blah, blah, and you have to wear a condom and all that stuff. Like my mom, there was no way. She was never touching that. But my dad was intuitive enough, at least with me, to kind of go, okay,
here's some information you could probably
use. You might need this.
Yes.
You might this information. So, and because I was so, as a young person, so open to everything, I took everything in, and I took everything as gospel at the same time.
Okay. So you trusted everything.
Trusted
that came
it
in.
all.
You thought it had authority.
So, and so again, it's taking those pieces that were from the Old and New Testament that say, the Ten Commandments, but then the demystification also was still there of, well, if I look at a woman and a woman's beautiful, and if I have a feeling towards that woman, whether that is mental, spiritual, or physical, well, those were all bad things. You're going to hell. It's another mark to you too. So if I looked at you, T.A.R.A, and go, you're such a beautiful woman, I'd love to be a part of your life, which means many things to me, not just making love. But they boxed it up for us. You're going to hell automatically. And if you think it, you're not getting through the pearly gates.
Isn't it? Is it so binding? It's so rooted in fear.
Yes.
It means you're wrapped up in fear and anxiety and this constant feeling of overstepping or making a wrong move or, oh my gosh, with this like very powerful messaging of this almighty being that is judging you as being worthy or not. And then your entire salvation rests on it. I mean, that is pretty terrifying. To grow up with that. I was raised Catholic in the Catholic Church, so it didn't have the same heaviness on the whole salvation and stuff, but a lot of guilt. A lot of guilt as the motivator, and that your life needed to be, you had to suffer in order to earn your worth, right? That kind of thing too. But we definitely had the women as less than. meant, the messaging. And for me, it started to creep in when, like me questioning it, because I didn't start questioning till way later in life. Like I was always, like, you know me, a rebel spirit in the sense that I will speak up and say, this doesn't really make sense. But it was always with the intent of making things better or changing it, that kind of thing. It wasn't until my daughters were old enough to start hearing what the messaging was. And I found myself going, don't listen to that part. And, you know, you're equal and you're not responsible for, the whole, you're responsible for lustful thoughts of men, like that kind of stuff. Yes. I was like, oh God, this is horrifying. I don't want my daughters hearing this. So that's for me, that was in my 30s, my early 30s, when I started seeing things from a different perspective. But for you, it was a lot younger. You were in your teenage years. Would you say you're later?
In my teenage years, so much to the point that I left home at 16.
Okay.
Because I wanted to live a life outside of that, what seemed to be, I was in a trap at home. Even though it wasn't my parents, I don't think they were willingly trapping me there, but it felt like that was what I needed to leave.
Yeah.
Now, of course, my dad was always making sure I was okay. I worked for him at the same time at the gas station, so he could take, and my mom was more or less. The time I'll never forget where I decided this is it was when I would, after school, and in high school, or junior high, high school, I'd go after school, take the bus, go and pump gas with my dad until he came home at 7 o'clock or whatever. And then we come home, have that time together, and of course we had to have dinner. Well, this one night we're having dinner, and I see my mom come around the corner, and it's like it was in slow motion. And she throws a package in the air, and it goes, whoo, woo, woo, boom. It was a condom. I had condoms in a book hidden in my bottom drawer.
Okay.
And my mom's going through my stuff. and she says to the guy, she goes, Alan, and looks at me.
It's like your dad needs to deal with this. Yeah.
And my dad looked at me, and he just kind of gave me a grin, and he said a few words to me so that my mom would walk away.
Oh, okay.
So, because he knew what, he was a little bit taken back himself.
And he was probably torn.
He was torn because he wasn't torn about the condom. He was torn because he was blindsided by mom, who mom needed to have the power to take the point. And that was her power point.
Okay.
And so that happened.
But he had an affinity to you as your dad, like father, son, knew what, you were, the reality of the situation. So he probably felt like in the middle where he had to sort of
And that's what he was. He was stuck.
Yeah.
It did cause problems at one time in their marriage where they did not sleep together for 3 nights. I'll never forget that. But that's also because my mom banged up my dad's favorite car. But it was not just the car. There was also some stuff going on with me, and they were at odds about it. Right. So, yeah. So that was fascinating. But he just basically, it was almost like it was just like, okay, and then we would talk about it separately, and he said, he was like, I'm glad you're on that right trail.
Okay.
I'm glad, because he knew. He's like.
But for your mom, it was the whole having sex outside of marriage? Was that
completely?
Okay, that was the belief system or the messaging.
Yeah.
So you were sinning.
Yes. Plus,
okay.
she thought I was gay. Oh. On top of it.
Okay.
Because of the earring.
Right, in the left ear.
In the left ear. Yeah. Right to almost her last year of life. She thought that the 2 marriages I had were beards for me to be gay.
Okay.
Oh, he likes musicals. He likes music.
Right.
Oh, he likes secular music. Oh, he likes that music. I had an 8-track with Kiss on it. She thought it was the devil's worship. Well, those guys looked like the devils anyway. But to her, it was devils singing to me.
Wow.
And it was just verboten. Even Kenny Rogers in the first edition was like,
Even Kenny?
And Rod Stewart at that time.
Oh my gosh.
It was just like, This is the devil's work. So much that I actually went to, I don't know if any of your crowd will know who Ravine is. Ravine was not a soul tuner like you, but one of those guys who would hypnotize people.
Oh, it was like a mind reader?
He was a hypnotist is what he was. He wasn't a mind reader.
Okay.
He's touring again now.
Really?
In Canada.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, he was this guy, but he was a big deal.
Okay.
And he would go and play these centers in Western Canada that 2,000 people would come and see this.
Amazing.
And of course, he was the kind of guy who goes like, okay, T.A.R.A, now you're a chicken. He'd be cluck, cluck, clucking. So I went to one of these guys, and I also, at a separate time, went to a spiritual leader guy in order to touch me, to get the rock and roll out of me. So I would listen to hard rock music. I'd listen to Jimi Hendrix on the way in. I'd do through the whole thing in the Ravine. He'd put me out. I come out and go, I should be cured. because I'd say, I need to be cured of rock and roll. And he goes,
Amazing.
and he's like, look at, and I remember, I'll never forget, he looks and he's like, okay, you're out.
Wow.
Same with the spiritual leader, you're out. And then, of course, I would wake up and going, I'm still the same person.
Yeah.
I go back in and I go, oh, and I put the 8-track back in, and whatever the rock song
because
I'm listening
something was pulling at you or calling you in this
Calling me to
music,
get
even
rid of
though
it,
your
but
brain
not. Yeah.
was like wrestling with this belief or this conditioning. So you work in music full time. You've worked in the music business for decades and decades and decades and decades. So would you say that music was sort of a means or a portal or a beginning step to you really coming into alignment with who you are outside of this sort of conditioned thinking and all this fear around the messaging that you're getting? Was it music, do you think, that played a huge role?
It was
in
music.
That? Okay.
It was the music, and it was the alignment of the way the music felt.
Okay.
Because I wasn't in my earlier life so much of a listening lyric sort of person, right? I could sing along because they were the words to the song, but never took the lyrics into what they were. Right?
Okay.
So it didn't affect me in that sort of way. And in that sort of way, whereas the music always spoke to me. And it was my very first love, and it was also my very first escape. But it was also my father's very first escape, because he played organ and piano and sang in the choir, no different than I did, right? Thinking that it was a musical way of being part of the religion, therefore.
Right.
For me, that was the way it was. And I'm sure my dad and I never talked about it, but I think it was that way for him too.
So do you feel like... when you were listening to music, was the conflict that the music felt so good to you to listen to, but was it the words? Like what was the element of the music that your mom would have had the most difficult time with? It was was it what it was saying to you, or was it all of it? It was just all written off as of the devil.
It's all written off as the devil. If you're not singing a gospel tune in church, you're the devil's worship. Okay. You're doing the devil's bid.
Oh my gosh. So tell me about how, like, because you kept listening to it, you were drawn to it, and it made you feel better. It felt good. So when did you first notice there was less conflict, where you were just really letting go of those beliefs? They had less power over you. The fear of that. Was it right away? No.
40s, 50s.
Really?
That was a long time for me. And I was going into the music business, no less, which was my ultimate thumb to the religious side, to be in the music business.
So it was your rebel spirit all the way through.
I rebelled it all through.
Okay.
I mean, honest to God, I rebelled it all through.
Right.
You know, not realizing and thinking, well, if I'm a little bit of a rebel, okay, well, then I'm getting what I need.
Right.
I'll never forget my first, a big concert a buddy and I went to was Kiss. Right, because I love Kiss.
You love Kiss.
I love
Kiss.
Kiss.
You went on the Kiss cruise.
I went on Kiss cruise, thank goodness. But I'll never forget, because of course they drink gin, so I should drink a gin. So I drink a Mickey of lemon gin.
Oh my God!
I go to the show. I don't see the band because I'm puking in the toilet the whole freaking show. My buddy goes, "What is wrong with you?" Because I was trying to live and escape at the same time, and I never understood drugs and alcohol, and I do now, because I'm more of a scientist with it. I just know what levels I want to be at. But in those days, I didn't, because I just thought, if I'm really high and drunk, I'll just have such a great time, and the music will take me away, and I'll forget all of this other stuff, never really dealing with my past, but carrying my past.
Right. And trying to escape it at the same time.
And trying to escape it all at the same time.
Carrying it and running from it all at the same time.
Yeah, because I'm going to heaven. I know I am.
Right.
But if I can keep them all if I can balance them all off, I can still go to heaven. I might have a little house, not a big one in heaven. I'll have the little house in the corner in heaven, because I balanced this all off.
Right.
And of course, none of that I don't believe any of that stuff.
Yeah,
anymore.
it kind of falls away, as you because your relationship with God would be probably what you would still use to describe that.
Definitely.
Like that was language that I used when I was coming up in this. I wouldn't use God so much for me. I mean, I guess for me it's not really a charged word, but I would say probably love. I would still say Holy Spirit. I still use those words. All that is, source. I really love source as a word to describe it, because it sort of takes away the patriarchal element that's with the word God that I grew up with. But it still feels like a comforting word. It's not like when I say that I'm just like, it still feels comforting. But whatever it is for you, that connection to what is bigger than us and all that is, you always felt that. but the belief system you were taught kind of contradicted it, because you were experiencing, or you felt like all accepting, and you felt like the love for people and humans. So when you were being taught to segregate and isolate and say, no, you can't really love those people because of XYZ, and these are not our people, because did it always feel conflicting for you?
It hurt me a lot. I was so conflicted because my dad was such a gregarious guy. My mother's a little shyer. You know, she was good in her own ladies group, as she was called, but my dad, being an entrepreneur and being a seller, and he loved people, and that's what I love people, and I love talking to people and listening to people more than ever now, right? Because I just find stories, and that's what interests me. And that's what interested my dad too. He was a people person. He worked with the people, and that's how he, as maybe my mom would say, got away with what he did, wearing a pink puff, you know, and it's like, well, if you wear pink, you're gay. Happy? Does that mean happy, Mom? No, it doesn't. But what does that mean? I don't know. I'll never forget. I don't know what was going on in the kitchen, but the radio was always on in the house, and the Village People came on. YMCA, and my mom goes, I love that song. And I go, Mom,
do you know what it's about?
Do you know what it's about? No. Okay, and so I didn't even go there, because I knew that would be a trigger or one of the two things, or both were going to happen. And then I said, well, you realize they're gay, as in they like each other. And then she goes, just shook her head, and we never spoke about it again, because she was afraid. And I think this came from you, T.A.R.A, in a soul session we did, and asked the question of me when we discovered something earlier this year of my past, was your mom gay? I think deep down, there was something inside of her where she was attracted to women.
Right.
In a way that was so unsettling for her, because she was the last child to come out of her family, I think of 7, but she was the forgotten child. They weren't supposed to have her. She was always told, you weren't supposed to be born.
Oh, gosh.
You are a mistake. Here are the hand-me-downs. So she really took it on the chin that way, right? Yeah. And then didn't bring it necessarily over to being a mom, but it came through. So her fears came through on us.
Okay.
And I don't blame that on her, because I understand that portion of her more. I can hear her now saying thank you, but I understand that more with her.
So, and you're like, something in your gut is saying there probably was something more going on.
I think there was, even if she would have never admitted it. And it'll be the first thing I ask in heaven, which it probably would be the 9th thing I ask in heaven. But
it's so interesting to me, because in my conversations with guests that have come chat, pre-production conversations and stuff, the link between denied sexuality or confusion around sexuality, shame around sexuality, and strict religions is so closely linked. And I cannot believe we are still having conversations now about excluding, a section of humanity based on this belief that has no actual scriptural, again, don't come at me. If you want to have a real conversation, internet about it, I'm happy to do that. But to use a couple of lines from scripture to support a behavior that isolates and shames and causes so much pain and suffering to a section of humanity, to me, is the most anti-Christian thing you could possibly do. It's 100%. Like you totally missed the whole message of inclusion and no judgment and do not be afraid. Love, love each other the way you need to be loved. Like, how much more simple can it get than that? And then everything is a contradiction to that, all the rules. So, but I'm amazed at how often the conversation about sexuality comes up in the conversation about a religious structure you're being raised in.
I think it's been through history.
And I know it's been a big part of your history too, and your life, and what you were dealing with your parents being afraid, or your mom particularly being afraid, and you picking up that message and not having the freedom to just be who you are without boundaries and without labels and confinement. Yeah. And it's so funny, because I was raised you know, I wouldn't say strict, because my mom wasn't a black and white Catholic by any means. You know, she just really loved the community. I loved the community. It was my social group. It was my youth group. You know, I have so many wonderful memories growing up in the church. It's where I learned to sing. It's where I found my voice, all these great things. But after I went through my divorce, you know, there was this, you know, because it was a big event in my life. I had been married for 27 years and we have 7 children together. And in my kind of like falling apart and rebuilding it, one of the questions that because somebody asked me, are you going to start dating? And so we got into this because I never dated, right? Like I was married at 19, right out of high school. And so I had this moment where I was like, wait, am I heterosexual? Because I was never given, there was never an opportunity where you thought about it and you chose it. It was just assumed that you are. Like, this is what is expected of you, and this is, you know, you get married to a man and you have children and you raise a family, and this is the thing. It was never a conversation, ever. Yeah. So I had that moment where I was like, I don't know, am I? Because there's such a spectrum, and it's not like I'd been out in the dating pool and really figuring it out. I was just, you know, that's just how I was raised. That's just what you do. So we ended up having this really great conversation about it, and then turning the question on myself and thinking, I don't know, you know, am I? Like, because
I know who I am.